All right, says you are live. Well, I hope I am. We have the little group. We're right on the edge of closing out the Feast of Sukkot for 2024.
Hey,
It has been one of the most fun experiences I've personally ever had. It's exhausting. I didn't think that teaching twice a day would be so exhausting, but I somewhere along the way I got old. Turns out this isn't blonde hair. I just thought I was, a natural blonde somehow, but turns out I'm all right. What we're going to talk about tonight is living as though there is a God. You can take that a number of ways. You can say, well, I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a Muslim, I'm a whatever, and of course I live like there's a God. Do you now? Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, a world famous clinical psychologist, best-selling author, major internet influencer, and one-time professor at Harvard University. And of course, that was back when that actually meant something. He was once asked, many times asked, if he believes in God. There's a whole story there. I'm not going to tell it to you. If you want to know about it, go look him up, because I would really like, if you don't know who this man is, for you to go find him on, what's this thing called? YouTube and listen to some of his teachings. He is fabulous. Especially this, he's doing a psycho as in your psyche, mental, because he's a psychologist, a psychological look at the stories in the Bible. And so he went from a man growing up with no religion in their home. They weren't churchgoers. His parents weren't atheists. He wasn't atheist. They just didn't go the religious route. And so he went the academia route, obviously being a professor at Harvard for 5 years or so. And they didn't run him off. Like I said, this is back when it actually meant something. He is from Canada, had the opportunity to go back to Canada and be a professor. Apparently, they have a really good college up there. It's UT, eh? Get it? It's the only thing I can think of with the be able to slip A in there. I have no idea what the name of the college was. I really like this guy. I would really like for you guys to listen to him and give me some feedback on it. If you turn one on, he seems really, really, really over your head and I don't understand anything. Just sit there and listen to him. And when it's finished, ponder it for an hour or two, maybe a day or two, and then go back and listen to it again. And if that's still difficult, ponder an hour or two or a day or two and go back and listen to it a third time. And by then, you should be not thoroughly confused, but just a little confused. And then find another one. And after you listen to 2 or 3 of those things, 2 or 3 times, you can give yourself, stretch it out, no more than 2 of those in 1 week. After you've stretched it out, you will have gotten used to all of the new words that you're not used to listening to, because he is a professor of psychology, so he's using a lot of words specific to psychology. And if they're not specific to psychology, they're words that we don't use in everyday English, but he does because, he's a professor. But you'll get it. It's just you're hearing stuff that you're not used to hearing. And just stick with it, because once you finally get past the acronyms and the words you've never heard before and all of that, you hear the Bible in everything he's saying. In these earlier ones, he wasn't really thinking along those terms. It was amazing that his trip through psychology led him to believe there must be a God. It didn't tell him which God it was, but he somehow wound up leaning and moving toward Judaism. Now, he's got some Christian friends that he does conferences with, and they're smart people. And so he does get into the New Testament and talk about those things, but it's from not a religious point of view, but a psychological point of view. And he's dealing with the religion. I don't know. You just got to experience it. It's really neat. Okay, anyway. So people started asking him if he believed in a God, and he didn't like that question. And just go hear his version of it, because there's a good reason for him not to like that question. But in the end, he had to think about it and see if he could come up with some way to address this issue, because apparently it was coming up a lot. And so he finally said, I live my life as though there is a God. And so he got a lot of flack from a bunch of Christians. Oh, see, he's not a Christian. He's not going to hell because he doesn't believe in the name of Jesus and blah, that. Oh, my. Okay, whatever. But think about what he's really saying. Apply what he's saying to your life. Let's not worry about his soul. No man can come to God unless the Spirit draws him. So there's nothing you can do about that, even if you're worried about his mortal soul. I personally am not, because that's closer to the Bible definition of salvation than you're ever going to find anywhere else, even in the Bible, because the Bible doesn't really explain it. But anyway, you have to kind of know the language, and then you should understand it. But if you don't have that, then it becomes difficult. So he says, I live like there is a God. Sometimes the simplest questions and or answers are actually the deepest. What would your life be like if you could see with your eyes the Almighty God standing right in front of you everywhere you went? At no time would there ever be a time or place that you could not see God standing right in front of you, looking in your eyes at all times, in the shower, in your car, at your work, in your downtime, in your vacation time. There would be no time that you open your eyes and Almighty God, the creator of everything that is seen and unseen, is standing there looking you in the eyes. How different would your life be? What would your life be like if you could feel the Almighty listening to you, as if the sound coming through your ear stuff was so somehow attached to God that you could actually feel the words somehow running through his ear and your ear at the same time. I mean, I don't know how I would describe that, but hopefully you get the idea. You are physically aware that everything you hear, he is hearing. Everything that you feel, he is feeling. Everything you think, well, let's just say listening. You can't think a thought without being fully aware that when you have a thought, God is listening to that thought. Think about this. This is exactly true, biblically speaking. Everything you hear, he hears. Everything you see, he sees. But there's more to it than that. I got, I think I'm on the wrong. I thought I had the wrong mouse there. Sorry. So I'm going to go over a verse I think we went over a little bit earlier this week, but I want to look at it a little differently. And I'm going to give you a translation, a type of translation that I haven't given in a long time, but I can't find a way to translate this verse without going to the thing I used to call the flowery translation that I used to try to get people to do. Some of you won't know what that is. It's from the early days of the Bible study methodology. There's no way to do this translation in this verse without resorting to this. So we're looking at Exodus chapter 3, verse 7. And he said, Yahweh, so Yahweh said, seen. You know, it's I saw something, but it's in plural, so I have seen it. SEEN, but it's that same word two times. Seen me. You know what happens when the exact same word is spoken two times in a row. So he has really seen. Next word, affliction. People me. So he's really seen the affliction of his people who in Egypt, so because this is being said while they're still there in captivity under, let's see, his name wasn't Telly Savalas. What was his name? Yul Brynner. Yeah, Yul Brynner had all them Jews. And this when God was talking about this when Yul had a hold of them. All right, so and outcry there. So he has really seen the affliction, whatever that is, of his people who at the time were in Egypt, and heard their outcry. But it's outcry there heard is how it's said in Hebrew. But we would say it, and heard their outcry. Me, and I have heard their outcry. Then it says from faces. And we're going to have to talk about that in a minute because that's odd. Now we know what to do with two faces, le pane. This is mi pane. And I don't know if we've ever had this before. I had to look it up, but it is interesting. It's not life-changing or anything, but it is. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. So from faces, whatever that means, oppressed his, for know me, et which is pointer, sorrow his. So we were okay up until the From Faces thing, and then everything went into overdrive. So Vayomer, and he said Yahweh. So and Yahweh said Ra'ol Ra'iti. Think of it as if these words are joined together, but it's seen because it's past tense. Seen, seen, and then the me, myself, and I is added to the end of the second word. So I have, we'll say, really seen. But what is it to really see, right? Mm-hmm. Well, we'll have to start with what is it to see? And we can go from there. So to see is to, see something with the eyes, of course. And there's, again, one word, lots of different ways to use that word. I'm going to skip a whole lot of them. But it is to look upon someone, to view that someone or something, to behold that someone or something. But it's from the idea of to be pleased with the sight, as the eyes linger on objects of pleasure, and with them we feast our eyes. And everyone who has had children, or that favorite niece or nephew, it's the same thing, because I've done both. I have children and I had a favorite niece, and everyone in the family knew it. If you've been through that, or let's say you're still, I still look at my wife as that 19-year-old girl that stood up on that stage that night and ripped out a song like I have never heard before. The voice she was like 40 pounds, little teeny thing, and it was the biggest, boomiest voice you ever heard in your life, and I was instantly smitten. And I don't know if I've ever said this in front of her before, but I was standing in the choir. It was my first time. I'd just gotten back in town, and I didn't know there were some new people there, and all the older people, of course, knew me. But they were, these new people thought I was new. They didn't realize I was coming back. So I'm standing next to like two new guys, and one of the old guard guys, he's standing there, and I turn and I say, "Woo, who's the girl?" And the guy standing right over here said, "That's my wife." Oh. And I was like, "Wow, she can really sing." Oh. That's for backtracking. Gotcha. Oh my gosh. I was broken-hearted in that moment and had to keep it to myself. Yeah, that's the lingering of the eyes on something very pleasing. Because that was a feast for my eyes and my ears. I don't think I'd ever heard a woman that small sing that loud and boomy before, and with just clarity on pitch, and it was a fun song and a fast song, and she was rip roaring. I'm sorry, I'm going to go off that.
I was not 19.
Yes, she was. Oh yeah, you would have been a little bit older when that happened, right? Because Mindy.
Yeah, Mindy was 5.
No.
I was 26.
Oh, she's 26. So that's why I came back from the military.
All right.
Anyway, we may have been a little off on the date there. Okay, let's see. What was the other stuff I want to talk about this word? Went down memory lane there and really enjoyed it at that time. You say I get lost and get really scared. Because there's the negative side. I can linger on something horrific and stuff like that, but the biblical world, that was not something that they would have really frowned on someone who did that. But somebody did, right? It's the word. This word is also used of other senses, not just the eyes. It's somebody will say something to somebody and it explains something to somebody. And what do you say? Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Actually, you heard, you understand, you're perceiving. This word is used that way a lot. People saying, oh, I see, when someone said something.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually quite common in Hebrew, and I think in English as well. It's used of the word taste. Now, that one, the only example I remember on this one is when the dog is digging in the ground and they put their nose down in there. So it's used of smell for sure, but it's also used of taste because dogs tend to stick their tongue in there. I don't know how that would play to a human, but I do know it's applied to a dog like that somewhere. I just remember it from way back when. It's just your feelings. Somebody saying, "You just don't see me," something along those lines. This it's the same word, and it see. Of course, in Hebrew, it's not SEE. But of course, it's of perception. We kind of already hit that. It's of the feelings. It's of things that you're enjoying in your mind. So this interesting word, isn't it? Lot to it. And all of that applies to this verse. All of it. So then you have that same word again. So what you're going to do is think of it this way. If you're seeing something, it's to see multiplied upon seeing. If it's something you heard and you said, I see, of course, that's perception. So this is perception multiplied upon perception. Feeling multiplied upon feeling. Because two words exactly the same together. This is the big time application. Two different words that mean essentially the same thing. That's amplification, but not like this. This is like multiplication. This makes it huge. So that you got those two words, and then there's et, which is just an arrow, and then we have oni, which gets translated as affliction, because back in the olden days, people said, "I'm so afflicted." Really? No ways. I hope that doesn't become popular again. What is affliction? It's misery. Misery. I feel like I'm saying that word strange. misery. Misery. I'm miserable. It's to be wretched. And again, another 1800s word. Wretched is said of people who are poor, down and out, homeless, filthy, dirty, people like that. Generally homeless because they're alcoholics. They would say wretched. Those people were wretched. And then again, you had the darker side of that. Somebody who was a crook and a liar and a backstabber would be thought of as wretched. So we've got this miserable thing building up here. And this very same word, oni, was said of the poor. The poor. people who had essentially nothing.
Mm.
But then, in Hebrew, you have the negative, right? And the negative will have the positive. We just talked about, we just spoke about this afternoon. Well, you guys weren't, I don't think, did I have a thing this afternoon?
No, we didn't.
No.
Okay. So in one of the conversations, I think it came up that the word barach is to bend at the knee, is literally what it means. And so it's used of praise because back in the Middle East in the olden days when the Bible was first written and all that kind of thing, the highest form of praise was to get to bend your knees and drop to the ground and put your forehead on the ground. Yes, that came from Jewish culture. The Arab culture kind of borrowed it from us. And now if we do it, everybody says we're trying to appropriate Arab culture. No, we were the first. Although that could be highly disputed since Ishmael, the Arab, was born a little bit before the Jew son was. Oh, but wait, there's dad. Okay, yeah, us Jew. Well, it's still the dad of the two sons. So anyway, so you got the negative. So if that's the positive, that's the highest level of praise, of blessing. Blessing is the word I'm looking for. Then the highest, we have words for curse, not as in cussing, but I may the fleas of 1,000 camels invade your armpit. That's a curse. Although they would be much nastier if it really meant to be a curse. May you be barren and never have children. That would be an awful thing to say. You'd be cursing somebody, right? If you wanted to get, and we have several words we can use for that. But if you want to hit the highest level of cursing somebody, then what you do is take the highest level of blessing somebody and turn it on its ear and make that positive blessing word the very worst way to curse somebody. And we have an example of that in a book called Yov. Now, when all of that bad stuff began to happen to him, what did he do? There's your first Yov is actually the oldest book in the Bible. It probably should have been on the front of the Bible, at the front. And if it hadn't been, you would have realized that it said he fell on his knees. I forget how it goes after that, but it's indicating that he laid his forehead to the ground. And, right out of the gate, he begins to bless God. But things just kept getting worse and worse and worse. It's like being a rabbi teaching a lesson and everybody in the room snoring. But his wife comes to him at some point and says, "Why don't you barach God and die?" See, she's cursing him, but she is using the Jewish way or the Hebrew way of it being the worst kind of curse. Well, this word, back to our word, the poor, the wretched, and all of that sort of thing, it has a positive side. It is said of, I lost the word.
Affliction.
No, I lost here it is. It is said of piety, of people being very humble, of being mild and meek. You can see how that's the total opposite of all of that other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the word is used both ways, but it's almost always in the negative. And in this sentence, it is in the negative, just in case you're wondering. So our next word is ami, my people, or people me, people my. And it's not really my. People me would be the more correct way to say it. So God's calling the children of Israel, if you will, his people. It says Asher be Mitzrayim, my people that are in Egypt. Then it says Ve'et, so there's an arrow and then the word and. Za'akatam, oh man, and their outcry. Remember, he has noticed the, what were the words we used for that? Now I've got the good side in my head. The misery and the poverty and the wretchedness of his people. He has taken notice of that. And he's also obviously now telling us that he has heard their cries. They're crying out to him specifically for help. God, the situation is awful. Please help us. That's the idea that you should see to this. It's to cry out. On the side, positive side, it's to cry out with acclamation and praise and honor and glory. Right there, you get the good side, but it's also to cry out with sorrow and complaining, even and prayer. So every word has its opposites. Now, since we start on the negative, everything stays on the negative, unless and until I don't know if I've ever taught that a comparison contrast. There's a way that you start off negative and then go positive, or you start off positive and go negative. That's a writing style. That's not happening here. We'll talk about that some other time because I think I'm kind of running along here. That is followed by Shamati. So now we know that he's heard. See, that hasn't been said. It's kind of been implied so far, but now it's actually said because this is the proper order to say these things. This wraps up what has he heard? He has heard their misery and their poverty, seen it, and now he's heard their outcries. And in this case, you could have seen the misery and the poverty, and you could have seen the outcries. You could have heard the misery and the poverty. You could have heard the outcries. It's all kind of blends together here. But to hear in Hebrew, Shema, Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, right? Mm-hmm. To Shema, you have to do three things. It literally has to be three things, or it doesn't work. First, you have to hear with your physical ears. These flappy things, the sound has to go in here. You have to hear it. Then that's step one. Then step two is you have to understand what was said. And I'm talking whole heart, mind, and soul. You truly have to understand what was said. So if you heard it, but you don't understand it, you cannot Shema. If you don't understand it, or if you I can't think of a way to turn that around, so we'll leave it at that. Now here's the third one, is the most important. The third one, first you hear, then you understand, then you have to obey. Whoa, I just did something really weird with the computer. Mm-hmm. You have to obey. And to obey is maybe not what you think. It's to obey is really not the right way to say it. Most of the time, that would be the right word to say in your translation. The truth is, that's not what it means. It means act upon. So if I'm standing before you on a stage, giving a lecture, preaching like a Pentecostal, whatever, sitting in a chair, talking like a rabbi, it doesn't matter. I'm up here doing this thing. And I say to somebody or to everybody, man, I am thirsty. And, so now I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to talk about stuff. And everybody just sits there listening. Well, truthfully, they did not shema. And then on the other hand, they kind of did. Because not acting can be acting. And I'm talking acting upon. For instance, if you don't like the two people running for president, you could just not vote. You're not voting is a vote. They call that a vote of, what do they call it? What?
No confidence.
No. You got to get much lower down on the understanding pole for where I was going. I almost had it. Protest. A protest vote. I don't like this one. I don't like that one. I'm not going to vote at all. So that's a protest vote. So you actually did something. You acted upon it because there was a call to vote. You heard that it's going to be in November, probably on a Tuesday, just saying, and you're going to go vote, right? Or not. So if you don't vote, you've actually done something, which is being absent. But then again, if you know that I'm up here and thirsty and the tongue is beginning to stick to the roof of my mouth, and you know that you could walk across the room or into the next room and get me a bottle of water and help me out, and you don't do it, you did something. You acted upon it by deciding not to do anything. So it's confusing. Well, what's the obey? Well, if God says, do this and don't do that, and you do the opposite, now instead of that being an act, but not, the opposite kind, it's not like being an absentee and voting because it's a protest. This is disobedience, which is why it's used more for obey than it is anything else, because it's almost always tied to some command of God, to some command of your rabbi or some command of the Beit Din, things like that, that you'll find this word used way more in that than anything else. And so to say obey is why you would do it. But there has to be three actions, even if the third action is a purposeful non-action. Our next word is the confusing word, mipnei. The word mean has been added to the word pana, and then you have mipnei. So literally that's from faces. If the word has a lamed added to it, you would say two or four faces. Either way, that one gets translated into before, just the word before, or in the presence of, and we find this in front of the word Yahweh constantly. It's there just a lot. Well, Mibne is obscure, but have no fear. I found what it means. It's actually in the Gesenius if you want to check me out. Go to number 6437, and where it says mean P Yahweh, they explain how this works. But to put it simply, it means according to. According to. And it will every time. According to this, according to that, whatever. According to, when that word mean is attached to face or mouth, either one, it's going to be according to. And like I said, Gesenius is how I know that, because I don't think I've ever run into it before. So our next word is no geshai, sive, rather, not shy. Oh, yeah, sive. They have taskmaster. Well, you know, it lined up with, why do I want to call him Telly Savalas? Because he had a bald head. Yul Brynner and Charlton Heston. They showed us how that worked. The taskmaster over here with a whip just slamming people on the back saying, get to work. Okay. This word is no gesai. Nogas is your word, the root of your word. It's of a laborer. It is to work. It is used of a driver of animals in the image of that whip thing in driving an animal. Okay, so I guess now it's a whip thing on people. I suppose that's how that came about. I don't know. It is to urge someone to pay their debt. It is to demand that somebody pay their debt. It is of someone's reign, of their rule. It is the reign and the rule of a tyrant. Tyrant would be a much better word for this if you're just going to boil it down to one word. That would be a better word than taskmaster. There's an example in Gesenius that says, I know the reign and rule of the tyrant who has compelled. Okay, I take that back. Those are my words. Let's just skip that for the moment. To be pressed, harassed, to be forced to work, to be forced to the point of complete exhaustion, to be wearied by force. So we have ki yadata. This is important. Yadata. That's the word God is saying, I know. If we just go real simple here. But this word also means to see, like with your eyes, but it is of perception. Sure. It is to acquire knowledge, to know, to be acquainted. It includes the action of knowing, both as in commencing and as completed. The signification both of seeing and knowing. Okay. One, it is to know, to perceive, to be aware of, whether by the eyes, the touch of the mind, understanding. Two, it is to get to know, to discover, whether by seeing or hearing. It is to know by experience. It is to experience someone. Then our next word, of course, is et, which is just an arrow. And our final word, mach-ovaid. Sorrow. It's metaphorically used of pain, but in general, this is the pain of the soul, sorrow. I really couldn't find a better way to describe it beyond just saying sorrow. I am not plugged in. That's nice to know. I'm glad my computer let me know. Wow. Okay. Good thing we're getting toward the end of this. I'm sorry for it taking so long. My voice is. I shouldn't have made fun of John F. Kennedy. I did not. I'm making that up now. It's a terrible joke. All right. So now I'm going to translate this. There's going to be a load of words, so don't try to write it down. Hopefully this will show up on what's this called? YouTube. Okay. YouTube. So you can go back and if you really want to write it down. But if you're going to translate this verse such that you have any shot at making an English speaking person truly understand these words, this is what you're going to have to do. Exodus 3:7. And Yahweh said, my eyes have seen, perceived, lingered, beheld, witnessed, and lingered. I didn't know I said that twice. Multiplied upon seeing, perceiving, beholding, witnessing, and lingering. The lingering on the continual misery, unlimited suffering, poverty, emotional and physical distress of my people who are in Egypt. Their sorrowful cries, their desperate pleading, and heartfelt longing, I have heard with my ears, understood with my whole heart, and